Everybody, let's go ahead and get started here. Glad you're here tonight. We've only got this session in our class left to go. The next Wednesday night we get together, the summer series will be going on, and there'll be other things going on. So I thought about what to do with this last class period, and I thought I would talk briefly about some tools available to you to use in studying the Bible, and then we're going to talk about a little bit of historical perspective on the New Testament. There's a couple of handouts there that you'll be looking at during the evening. First of all, everybody, if you're going to really study the Bible, you need to have 2 or 3 different versions of the Bible. The reason is that many times it helps to get different possible translations to really understand the meaning of a passage. And I would recommend that basically you pick one of or 2 or 3 of the versions that come from here over, and I'll add to your list here a little bit. These some people call form-driven versions. They're more literal translations of the Greek and Hebrew text of the Bible. Of course, you've got the New American Standard Bible, which is the NASB, and you've got the Old American Standard Bible, which is in the same category. They didn't put it on there because nobody uses it anymore. But Old American, ASB, and NASB over here. King James and New King James, quite literal. The ESV, quite literal. The RSV and NRSV, fairly literal. I would probably put the NIV over on this side of the line, or right on the line, because it's not much different than the RSV. But anywhere you go from here over, you'll be pretty well on target. Now, most of these in here in the middle, meaning-driven versions, you get a little more paraphrasy the further you go over to the right on the chart. The New American Bible, the New Jerusalem Bible, these are Catholic translations of the Bible, fairly good translations of the Bible. You've got some others like the Jerusalem Bible that's an older Catholic translation. It's still a good translation of the Bible. You're not going to go very far wrong using any of these, but some of these might be good for comparison purposes. If you were using like a New American Standard or a New King James and get one of these as a comparison Bible, it'd be a good comparison for you to have. The further you go over this way to the very far right on the chart, you get into paraphrases. The Living Bible paraphrase by Kenneth Taylor. It's not a translation at all. It's just it's his commentary on the Bible. The Message is the most paraphrasy paraphrase that we've got. Some people try to give this to our young people. It's not a Bible. It's just a commentary on the Bible. And I don't recommend any of these over here. These are just commentaries. If you want to use them as a commentary, fine, but don't use them as a Bible. Because they're not the Bible, they're just commentaries on the Bible. So pick 2 or 3 of these. I didn't say pick one and get married to it. I said pick 2 or 3 of these and compare them as a Bible student, and it will really help you in your study of the Bible. Now, another thing I'd like to talk about tonight is some tools. You'll see over there in that little stack of books there on the front table, there's a Strong's Concordance. A good concordance is good if you're still in the paper generation and you want a paper book in your hands and you want to use a concordance like Strong's or Young's. You can look up words in those things and etc. You've got a couple of little Nelson's Bible Handbook and Smith's Bible Dictionary there. If you're still part of the I've got to have it on paper generation and you want something on paper, you can look up the words and it'll tell you what things are. Like look up Pharisee and it'll tell you what a Pharisee is. Or look up some obscure city in the Bible and it'll tell you where it is and what it is. Bible dictionaries are good for things like that. But if you are in the more modern world and you actually use a computer, then you don't need any of those books like Bible dictionaries and concordances. This is a product, I'll tell you about 2 of them. This is a product that you see up there in the left-hand corner called PC Study Bible. PC Study Bible. And you can go from simple to real complex. But if you want a good Bible study program that'll do just about anything you want to do, PC Study Bible will do it. If you click on this little thing up here, see where it says Bibles up here at the top? You'll get a whole bunch of different versions of the Bible. And like, see, if I wanted to look up Genesis 1:1 like it is right here, this is the NIV. All I've got to do is click on New American Standard right here, and it'll give me the same verse in New American Standard. Or click on English Standard, and it'll give it to me in English Standard. Click on one of these, and it'll give me that passage in that version. So you've got unlimited versions there that you can study by just clicking on the different versions on the side. It's an excellent tool for comparison purposes. See that big Strong's Concordance there in red up there on the front thing? You've got several concordances or a concordance right under this. All you got to do is click on that little icon, type in the word you want to look up, and it'll give you every passage in the Bible in that particular word. Now, here's what it'll do, though. Look carefully. See, the New International is highlighted right here? So if you click on a concordance, it's going to tell you every place the word occurs in the New International Version. But if you want to tell the concordance, I want to look in the King James Version. And it'll give you every place a particular word occurs in the King James Version. But you have to tell the concordance which version of the Bible you want to look through. And, of course, different translations are different. Disadvantage of that is that many times the same English word will not be the same Greek words, and so you can get kind of confused there. All the commentaries you can ever want are right under that little icon right there. Just click on them. And you can get commentary after commentary on this passage. Whatever passage you're looking at, you just click on the commentaries, and you can read commentary after commentary on that passage. If you highlight a word and you want to see what Greek or Hebrew word it is, you click on this dude right here, and it'll give you the Greek and Hebrew word and the number in Strong's Concordance, that you can look it up in Strong's Concordance. If you want maps or something like that, you can click on media, and you can get all the Bible maps of Abraham's journeys or of the Exodus or anything else you want just by clicking on that little icon right there. And that's just scratching the surface of what this Bible program will do. So you can go from simple to complex. You can make this Cadillac or not. In the $150 to $300 range, you can have everything you want from soup to nuts, in there, if you want to really get into Bible study. Most of the younger preachers, I'm telling them not to spend their money today on buying a bunch of books, because you can buy a whole library right here by buying this one computer program. If you clicked on these and looked at how many commentaries is here, it'd cost you thousands and thousands of dollars to buy all those. So just about everything you'd need is in something like this. Now, if you really think you're just very, very serious and you want to get real high-tech and go with all the bells and whistles, the best Bible study program out there is called Logos, L-O-G-O-S, Bible Software. Logos Bible Software. And a lot of preachers and scholars that are really into it in a deep way get Logos. It'll interface with everything out there. And it's a more Cadillac. It'll cost you more money, and most of you don't need it anyway. But this will do a great job for most people, and you can kill yourself the rest of your life studying stuff in just this program right here. So I recommend it highly, either this or Logos Bible Software. Both of them are excellent programs. Really, that's all you need as far as extra tools, except for your Bible. Your Bible is still the best bet you have for studying the Bible. Anybody want to ask anything about that before we leave the Bible study program?
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
I've got 3 versions on my computer, but they're all free. But this is about, how much money is this?
Well, it's like we said, it's about $150 to $250, depending on what you get with it. But that's somewhere in the range. Okay. But then if you started, like for example, I've got a whole lot more than $150 in those books that are sitting right there. Which now seems really dumb, but back at the time, you could only get them that way. But 2 or 3 of those books are $50, $75, $100 a piece or something like that. So, all right. Now, everybody gets your little handout sheet that begins with Greek rule 125 BC on the left-hand side. You've got 2 of them that look a lot alike. One of them has Jesus' cross on the far right, and one of them has Jesus' cross on the far left. Get the one with the cross on the far right. And it says the century before Jesus. The century before Jesus. The other one says the first century. If you've got the first century, you got the wrong one. Okay? We're going to start back at 125 BC here. And these two charts kind of go in your notebook, and they'll give you kind of a context to put the Bible in. Greek rule was going on back at this time, 125 years BC. Alexander the Great and the Greeks were still ruling. The Ptolemies and the Seleucids, the Grecian kings, were ruling. And it was during this time of the Greek rule, and I couldn't go further back in this chart, that most of the popular Jewish apocryphal and pseudepigraphical books were written. Now what that means is that this big fat rascal right here, and another one just like it, this is the pseudepigrapha. It has books in it like the Book of Enoch, the Letter of Aristeas, the Assumption of Moses. It's got the Apocalypse of Baruch, 4th Ezra, Psalms of Solomon. These are some of the Jewish religious books that were written between the time of the Old Testament and the New Testament that tell you a lot about what the Jews believe. These are not inspired. They're not Holy Scripture. They're just religious writings of the Jews from this time period. They tell you a whole lot about the Jewish people, see, and they're actual original sources from that time. This one is the pseudepigrapha. The other one like this is the apocrypha. And they are worth having because they are original source material. If you really want to learn what the Jews believed, if you want to go to the horse's mouth, this is it right here. Okay? So you can buy all the commentaries you want, but the commentaries are going to have to refer to these. So why not just bypass all that and get the main thing there, see? So anyway, this is the books that come out of this period. Now in 63 BC, the Romans took over Palestine. They took over from the Greeks, and they ruled most of the world, but this was when they conquested the land of Palestine. So not too long before Christ was born, Romans occupied the land of Palestine. This was during the time of Julius Caesar. And it wasn't too long after that King Herod the Great, who was the Herod when Jesus was born, built the temple. Remember, Jesus said 46 years it took you to build this temple, or the Jews did, and said, you're going to raise it up in 3 days? This was the 46 years period where they were building this temple. It's right in here, see, before the birth of Jesus. Okay, Herod the Great. He's the one that tried to kill all the baby boys, and then he died. This is Herod the Great that we're talking about here. All right? Now, Herod the Great died around 4 BC, maybe a little bit, maybe 2 BC, somewhere around there. So his lifespan comes right in there. And Caesar Augustus was the Roman Caesar. See, Herod was the king of the Jews in Palestine, little bitty Palestine. Augustus Caesar was the Roman emperor over the whole known world, see. So Augustus Caesar's ruling in Rome. Herod the Great is the king of the Jews in occupied territory of Palestine. The Roman soldiers are occupying Palestine. Okay? It was about 4 BC that Jesus Christ was born. Okay? And we know this because it was during this time that Quirinius, the governor of Syria, was making the census that you read about in the Gospel of Luke, and you put all the dates together when Augustus was Caesar and all this other kind of stuff, and you arrive at a date about 4 BC. BC does not mean before Christ, by the way, so get that out of the way and you're all fine. Okay, so 4 BC, all right? So during this time, now one of the things I've done here on this chart, and yours is in black and white because we didn't want to pay for all the color copies, but the blue things that I have on this chart are Jewish sources. See these down here, the popular Jewish apocryphal literature, that's in blue because that's Jewish. Herod the Great is Jewish. These red things on the chart are Roman. See, Roman people, people that were not Jewish, pagan Roman people. Okay? Now, during the time Herod was building the temple before Jesus was born, the Qumran community, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, this was a Jewish community at Qumran near Jerusalem. This is when these people were already in this place, and they They had their little out in the desert community, and they were reading this library of Bible scrolls, and everything was found. But they were living in the time before Jesus was born. They lived here at Qumran until AD 68, until well into the next century. It was in 68 AD when the Roman armies came through to destroy Jerusalem that the Qumran people fled in front of the Roman armies, and they stuffed all their scrolls in those caves to hide them from the Roman armies, and they fled. But from at least the early 1st century BC to the middle part of the 1st century AD, these people occupied this community. Again, blue because they're a Jewish source. Now, you read about Pontius Pilate in the New Testament, right? Roman sources tell us that before Pontius Pilate came to be the governor of Judea, before Pontius Pilate, Coponius was the governor of Judea AD 6 through 9. He had Pontius Pilate's job before Pontius did. Marcus Ambivalus was governor of Judea from AD 9 through AD 12. Annius Rufus was the governor of Judea from AD 12 to AD 15. Roman governors that were ruling over Palestine on behalf of the Caesar, see. Valerius Gratus was the one that ruled right up until Pontius Pilate took over in AD 26. Okay? All right, so these people, they're in red because they're Romans. They're outsiders. They occupied. They came in and ruled over the soldiers and over everybody else in Palestine. These were the governors that were ruling during the boyhood and all that of Jesus. Brendan, you have a question?
So
Speak up.
It's kind of a silly question, but
No.
if you're reading this stuff before Christ, how did they date back then?
Right now, this is just Anno Domini, but we're dating this based on our present dating system.
Right, but what did they say? Did they refer in the books to the date of the time?
They would refer to the year of the emperor this or the year of the emperor that. And they had their own system of dating. Yeah. So you have to put all that together with what we are. But with our present calendar, these are the proper dates. So anyway, these were the governors before Pontius Pilate. Now, in the Bible, in the Gospel of Luke, it tells you in Luke chapter 2 that Jesus was born during the reign of Caesar Augustus. It tells you that. He was born when Quirinius was making the census. He was the governor of Syria. He was making the census. And he was born during the time of Herod the Great. So we know that it was during the time of Herod the Great, during the time of Augustus, and it was during the governorship of Quirinius. And all those dates corroborated give us this date right here. All right, now, another thing we have Annas the high priest. Annas was actually the high priest. He's in blue because he was a Jew. He was high priest AD 6 to AD 14. Annas was. Now that's when Jesus was a boy. See? Now there were several high priests between Annas and Caiaphas. Annas' cousins, his brothers, his blah, 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 everybody in his family. This was like the old godfather of the high priesthood. He was a political chess mover on the Jewish political chessboard. Caiaphas, Joseph Caiaphas, was the acting high priest during the time of Jesus' death. He was Annas' son-in-law. So old Annas was still controlling everything, even when Caiaphas was high priest. And if you remember the death accounts of Jesus, they took him to the old man first, or in one of the sequences, they took him to the old man and to Caiaphas. This guy was the figurehead. This guy was the political power behind the thing. But there's dates for all these guys. This guy ruled, and then several of them, like 6 or 7 of them ruled between these two guys. And this guy, like John says in John chapter 11, verse 30-something, or verse 50-something, he says Caiaphas was, quote, high priest that year. They were supposed to be high priests for life, but they were rolling them in and out of there like crazy, appointing one and appointing another, etc. So Jesus Christ was crucified, according to our present calendar, about AD 29. Now, see, people get messed up because they think he was born at 0. That's not true. according to our present calendar, that's wrong. He was born about 4 to 5 BC, see? And so instead of the church beginning in AD 33, you need to back that up about 4 years to AD 29, or maybe you could stretch it to AD 30, but certainly not AD 33. So when they tried to put the cornerstone on this building and say it was the church established in 33 AD, I said, let's don't do that. Let's say it was the church established in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost. Say that's Acts chapter 2. Let's don't just put the wrong date down there. But it is the one that was established in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost. Okay. Now, so Jesus approximately was crucified in AD 29. And this brings you to the end of the Gospels, see? So all of these things kind of give you a historical context for the things that were going on. Now, also Jewish sources. There's a couple other Jewish sources at the bottom of this chart. I'm going to widen out just a little bit here. Because this chart, you see where it says the Mishnah down here? The Mishnah is this fat little book right here. This is the sayings of the Pharisees, the sayings of the Jewish rabbis from 200 BC to 200 AD, which covers the lifetime of Jesus. Gamaliel's sayings are in this book. The teacher of Saul of Tarsus, see? Rabbi Shammai, Rabbi Hillel, other people that were living in, or their teachings at prominent time of Jesus are in this book right here. So if you want to know what the Pharisees actually said themselves without other people telling you what the Pharisees said, but you want to read the actual Pharisees themselves and what they said, the Mishnah is the book. This is translated from the Hebrew by Herbert Danby, the Mishnah. So I've got him as a Jewish source down here that covers both of these centuries. This is another Jewish source. Philo of Alexandria lived in Alexandria, Egypt. We have his writings extant too. So we've got the Mishnah, Philo of Alexandria. We've got the Dead Sea Scrolls. Quite a few Jewish sources from that period of time, plus the earlier Apocrypha, Pseudepigrapha of the Jews. Okay, let's go to our other chart. Yes, ma'am.
These other translations, they're translated in English, but what are they, like, are they like King James transversion or?
No, this is just more modern English, but this is like from the Hebrew and the English you'd speak today.
Okay, so it's something you can.
Oh yeah,
follow.
you can read it. Yeah, you sure can. All right, so now let's go to where Jesus is crucified and start at this end of the program. Now you remember those other governors of Judea that we listed all their dates before the death of Christ? This is Pontius Pilate, who took over in AD 26. And that was just 3 or 4 years before Jesus was crucified. He took over as governor. He made everybody mad because the first thing he did was march into Jerusalem with his troops holding up the golden busts of the eagles and the statues of Caesar. And the Jews went crazy because they didn't allow any graven images in Jerusalem. And he marched right in pushing those graven images in their face. And they rebelled, and all difficulties broke loose in Jerusalem, and he hated them, and they hated him. Another time he robbed the treasury of the temple treasury and built an aqueduct with the money out of the treasury, and they rioted over that. And he put soldiers among the crowd with clubs and weapons and beat a bunch of them to death and everything. Another time he pulled something similar to that. So they hated him, and he hated them. You got to remember that. And he was the one that was the governor that actually condemned Jesus to death. So it was in AD 29 or 30, somewhere in there, that the New Testament church actually began in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost. See, 50 days after the Passover, Jesus was crucified at Passover time. 50 days or so after that, Pentecost and the New Testament church began. All right, now we have this period. Let me widen out just a little bit so you can see this a little bit better. We have this period between AD 30, let's say, and AD 70. There's a 40-year period in there between AD 30 and AD 70. Now, most of the New Testament was written during that 40-year period. all of the books of the New Testament were written after the death and resurrection of Jesus. The Gospels were written, So during this time, this is when the first part of the book of Acts is going on. See? The initial spread of Christianity from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria and to the uttermost parts of the earth. Paul died in the mid-60s, early 60s. Paul died. Every single one of the apostles was dead by AD 70 except old John. He's the one that lived past AD 70. He was alive into the first part of the 2nd century. He lived into the 100s. But everybody else was dead by AD 70. Okay? During this time, you had living apostles. You had prophets that were speaking by inspiration and writing by inspiration. You had evangelists like Timothy and Titus, running around. The first elders and deacons were appointed in congregations after those congregations were established. You had congregational autonomy, meaning each congregation was independent, from all others. The word of the apostles and prophets was universal or Catholic truth. The word Catholic just means universal, all over the place. So the authority of the apostles and prophets wasn't limited to one church. It was in all churches. The authority of the inspired prophets was not limited to one church. It was in all churches, see? And the local elders simply taught the things that the apostles and prophets taught as authority. But this was the spread of Christianity. Now, by the time of the Jewish rebellion, when the Jews rebelled against Roman rule, and the Roman Emperor Titus came in with his armies. See, right in here is where the people at Qumran ditched Qumran and left their scrolls in the caves and ran off for cover. This is also, you saw the movie Masada. This is when the Romans took down Masada at this same time, when the Romans came through Palestine, AD 70. By AD 70, you had 3 of the Gospels already written. You had the book of Acts already written. You had the Pauline epistles already written because Paul was dead. You had 1st and 2nd Peter written because Peter was dead. The book of Hebrews was already written. All of these things were already in place by AD 70. See, some people say, well, these councils in the 3rd, 4th century voted in the New Testament. No, that's nonsense. These were already done and already widely accepted by AD 70. Okay? Now, during this time, there was a Jew that was kind of in cahoots with the Romans, and he was writing down a history of the Jewish people. His name was Flavius Josephus. One of the best things you can read on Jewish history that goes all the way back to the Bible times and all the way up through the 1st century and everything is Josephus. Now, he's just a guy, but he'll give you a real perspective from the Jews on the whole flow of Jewish history, especially the time of the 1st century BC, 1st century AD. So this is a good thing to have. And some of these Bible programs, you can buy this and you can read it along with everything else. But he's in blue because he's a Jewish source. Remember, the red ones are Roman. These are Jewish. Okay? Now, this kind of gives you a context for the period of the New Testament. Now, the book of Revelation and John's other writings were not written until near the end of the 1st century. We don't have exact dates on most of John's writings, but they were like at the earliest in the mid-80s and in the 90s of the 1st century. Revelation probably about 96 AD. We know this from several later sources, including Clement of Alexandria and Irenaeus and Eusebius and some others. But they placed John on the island of Patmos during the reign of Domitian. And Domitian ruled, the Roman Emperor Domitian. Do I have him on here somewhere? Yeah, I do, down at the bottom. See, he's in red there. Domitian ruled from AD 81 to AD 96. Okay? Now, when Domitian died in AD 96, John was released from the island of Patmos. And Nerva was an emperor that just barely ruled any time there, a year or so. And then Trajan came to power and ruled into the early part of the 2nd century. And John was still alive in the reign of Trajan, living in Ephesus, and he was administering churches and teaching Christians around Ephesus. So here at the bottom of your chart, you've got Domitian and Trajan, the next Roman emperor. You can draw an arrow from Trajan on into the next century because he kept ruling for a while in the next century. You have some early Christian writings that probably were written about the same time as the book of Revelation. One for sure is the book of 1 Clement. You have the Apostolic Fathers. It's the earliest church fathers. The book of 1 Clement was written in 96 AD, which is probably about the same time that the book of Revelation was written. And it's quite interesting because you can read the book of 1 Clement, and I challenge you to find anything in there that you wouldn't completely agree with doctrinally. The church has elders, and it's just like the New Testament church. But 1 Clement was one of the earliest ones. The Didache, which means the teaching, was either written in the late 1st or early 2nd century. It's one of the early church fathers, and we could go on and talk about some others. But the reason I give you this chart is, or these two charts, these give you kind of what was happening in the world and what are all the sources that you get things from. Now, if you read commentaries, which some people do, if you read commentaries and they say, well, the Jews, the Pharisees taught something, the first question you want to ask is, how do you know that? If they don't cite the passage from the Mishnah where they learned that, or if they don't give you the passage in Josephus where they read about that, see, then you just don't even listen to a word they're saying. See what I'm saying? Because the only way they're going to know what the Pharisees taught is this, right here. That's the only way. See what I'm saying? So if they say the Pharisees taught or whatever, what are they citing as references? Where did they get their information? Many of the commentaries you read are just somebody's ideas about something. Take that and just go, whoop, and go boom when it hits the trash can and let it ring around in the bottom, see? Because that's about how much that's worth. If somebody's really writing something legitimate, they're going to be quoting first century sources and telling you how they know the things that they're saying. They're either going to quote Scripture, or they're going to quote from Josephus, or they're going to quote from the Mishnah, or they're going to quote from Philo of Alexandria, or they're going to be quoting from some of these apocryphal Jewish books right here, and telling you what was going on and what the Jews believed. Or Roman sources to tell you about Pilate and Valerius Gratus and Caesar Augustus and all these others. If they're not telling you how they know, then they're not telling you. See? One of the things we have a problem with, especially with our young people, and it's getting this way with us older folks too, when you go on the computer and you just click on something on the internet and it just gives you somebody's discussion and you want to find out something about something, there's all this information just flying everywhere. You read it on the computer. Whoopie-doo. Where did the person on the computer get the information? Do they give you the reference? Do they show you where to go to find out how they found that out? See? If they don't do that, then it's not worth anything. Okay? It's just verbiage.
Snopes.
Huh?
Let's go to Snopes.
Yeah. So, this chart will give you kind of a perspective on what was going on, what the main sources are, and what you have to kind of, as touchstones, what are the sources to go to find stuff out. Anybody want to ask a question about that? Those two charts I found, with just keeping those charts around, will help you kind of keep it in perspective on what was going on during that time. Yes, sir, brother. Like,
you said BC does not stand for before Christ.
yeah, it's a Latin abbreviation, and I can't tell you what it is exactly. But it's not before the birth of Christ.
All right.
Okay.
And one other question: is there anything like, I forgot what these rulers were called? Like
They were
Colonius?
procurators or governors.
Okay. Is there any reason that the first three, like, each only reigned for 3 years?
Probably political. It's sort of like, did they keep the emperor happy in Rome? Did they Did they do what they wanted them to do? The Senate wanted them to do? Did they make somebody
So
mad?
you don't know about any like terms?
Well, we do know there wasn't any terms, no, but there were historical reasons why each one of these lost their job. Pontius Pilate got fired basically because he was so antagonistic with the Jews and caused so much trouble with the Jews. He wouldn't get along with the Jews, and he ended up in Samaria slaughtering a bunch more of them, and they said, that's it. And they finally got rid of him in AD 36.
Do you think that may be one of the reasons why he wanted to release Jesus was because he was antagonistic toward the Jews?
I think he was gigging them when he said, shall I release to you the King of the Jews? And he knew what that would do to them when he said to them. He was trying to make them mad. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think he'd have made him madder if he'd released him.
But you know when he dressed him up in the cloak and in the crown of thorns there, he was trying to make them mad. That's what he always did. When you read the rest of the history about what he did, you know that they hated Pilate and he hated them. And when they got him up in the early morning or middle of the night and they dragged this Jew in front of him and bothered him with that, that's the last thing he wanted, you know. Now, Jesus kind of upset him in the process, that's for sure. But he taunted him and taunted him and taunted him. And he kept on doing it after Jesus was crucified.
His wife also was upset.
Yes, she was. Yes, she was. Okay, so, yes, Miss Ginger.
I googled BC and it says on the internet it stands for before Christ.
Isn't that great? Yeah, that's good. That's great. Yes.
They just screw up on calendars. It's supposed to be based on.
If you go back to the beginning of time, different nationalities have different calendars. See, there have always been different calendars in different countries. And before there was any kind of standardization, like the Chinese were going by one calendar from the Ming dynasty to the so-and-so dynasty and judging off of that, and the Egyptians were going by a different calendar, the Romans were going by a different calendar. So that's a complicated subject, but it just boils down to now that we've kind of everybody settled on, okay, that we've got a dating system, and this is it, and this is where it fits. Okay? Time to go home now, I think, pretty close. What time is it? 20 after. Anybody want to ask another question before we adjourn for the night? Okay, y'all have a great night, and next week we'll be on a new class system. 6:30 or 7? 6:30.